Welcome to Jolene's Stories, where a woman who gave everything finally reclaims it.
My name is Maren Whitfield. I'm 62 years old, and on a Tuesday in October, I stood 3 feet behind a kitchen partition in my own daughter's house, holding a glass dish of cranberry sauce I had started preparing at 4 in the morning, and I listened to my son-in-law tell his cousin that he had canceled my contribution to the family health insurance plan because, in his exact words, she doesn't really need all those appointments. The dish was warm against my palms. I could smell the orange zest. I could hear the football game in the living room, and my granddaughter Lily laughing somewhere down the hall, and I could feel my own heartbeat in the place under my collarbone where Raymond used to rest his hand when he was tired. I did not move. I did not breathe. I just stood there with that dish, and I understood for the first time that the people I had been keeping alive with my own 2 hands had been quietly deciding which of my needs were real and which were drama. I want to tell you what I did next, but to do that, I have to go back further than that kitchen. Welcome back to our channel. This is a place for stories about people who gave too much for too long and then finally, quietly, stopped. Stories about the cost of being the one everyone counts on and the strange peace that arrives when you finally count yourself. If what I'm about to tell you sits close to something in your own life, please hit subscribe and stay with me. Drop a comment with the city you're listening from. I read them, all of them, and I want to know who's in the room with me tonight. This story is about a notebook, a phone call with 11 seconds of silence in it, and a casserole brought by a woman I had been wrong about for 14 months. It's also about the moment I stopped being the architecture of someone else's life and started being a person again. To understand how I got to that kitchen partition, you have to go back to the year my husband died. Raymond was diagnosed in February. By June, the oncologist sat us down in a beige office and told us the tumor in his pancreas had spread to places they could not reach. We held hands across the armrest. He squeezed once and said, "Well, all right then." That was Raymond. 38 years of marriage, and he met the end of his life the same way he met every other inconvenience, with a small nod and a plan. The plan, as it turned out, fell to me. The hospice nurse who came to the house for the intake was a woman named Bernadette with steady hands and a clipboard, and she explained the program calmly while Raymond sat in his recliner pretending to read the newspaper. When she left, I called Sloan. I told her the team would be coming 3 times a week, that they had a pain management protocol, that we would not have to do this alone. There was a pause on the line. Then my daughter said, "Mom, hospice feels cold. Daddy deserves to be at home with family, not strangers." I remember holding the kitchen phone with both hands. I remember looking at Raymond's slippers by the back door. I remember thinking, she's right. Of course she's right. And I called Bernadette back the next morning and canceled the intake. For 4 months, I nursed my husband by myself. I learned how to rotate his weight in the bed without hurting his hips. I learned the medication schedule, the morphine increments, the way his breathing changed in the last weeks. I emptied a retirement account I had built over 37 years as a pediatric occupational therapist. Money I had saved 1 paycheck at a time, working with toddlers who could not yet hold a crayon, teaching them how their hands belonged to them. I spent it on a hospital bed for the dining room, on a wheelchair ramp, on the home health aide who came twice a week so I could shower without listening for him. Sloan lived 20 minutes away. She called on Sundays. She did not visit once in those final 4 months. When Raymond died on a Wednesday morning in October, I called her at 9:15, and she said she would be over after work. She arrived at 7 that evening with a casserole from the grocery store and stayed for 45 minutes. I tell you this not because I want you to hate her yet. I want you to understand the floor I was standing on when she rang my doorbell 6 months later, sobbing, holding 2 toddlers and an eviction notice. But that's later. First, you have to know who I was before. I was good at my job. I want you to hear that without flinching. For 37 years, I sat on padded mats with children whose bodies would not cooperate with their wishes. Children with cerebral palsy, with sensory processing disorders, with the kind of developmental delays that made buttoning a shirt take 6 months of practice. I taught a 4-year-old named Marcus to feed himself with a spoon, and his mother cried in the parking lot. I taught a little girl named Adelaide to grip a pencil after a stroke, and her father sent me a Christmas card every year for a decade. I retired at 59 because Raymond's diagnosis came and I wanted the time. The clinic threw me a small party. The director said I had touched over 2,000 children in my career. I drove home that night and Raymond had set the table with the good china and made spaghetti, which was the only thing he knew how to cook, and we ate it like it was a feast. That was the woman who became, 3 years later in her daughter's birthday party invitation, our childcare situation. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. After Raymond died, the house was the loudest silence I have ever heard. I sat in the kitchen one morning in January and could not remember if I had eaten the day before. That was when Sloan called and said she and Derek had found a townhouse 20 minutes away and were thinking, just thinking, about whether I might be willing to help with Cody and Lily during the work week. Derek's company had restructured. Sloan had gone back to her marketing job. Daycare for twin 2-year-olds was, she said, honestly insane, Mom, like almost $3,000 a month. She did not ask directly. She left the shape of the request hanging in the air for me to fill in, and I filled it in, because filling it in was what I had always done, and because the silence in my house was a thing I could not survive much longer alone. I started the following Monday. I drove the 30 minutes to their townhouse at 5:45 in the morning so I could be there by 6. Derek left for the gym at 6:15. Sloan left for the office at 7. I had the twins from 6 in the morning until 6 at night, 5 days a week, for 14 months. I packed their lunches. I changed their diapers. I taught Cody how to use a spoon, the same way I had taught Marcus, with patience, with the gentle hand-over-hand pressure I had learned in graduate school in 1986. I read to them. I sang to them. I rocked Lily through 3 ear infections. I drove Cody to the pediatrician 4 separate times. I bought their snacks at the grocery store because Sloan's pantry was always empty, and I started writing the amounts down in a small spiral notebook I kept in my purse. Not because I planned to ever ask for the money back, but because I had been an occupational therapist for 37 years and documenting things was the way my brain organized the world. The first entry was on a Thursday in March. $26.78. Goldfish crackers, apple juice, 2 pounds of grapes, a box of those little squeezable yogurts shaped like tubes. I was not paid. Not $1. Not 1 day off in 14 months. When I had a head cold in April, I drove over anyway because Sloan texted at 5:42 in the morning, "Please tell me you're still coming. Derek has a presentation." I went. I wore a mask. I gave the twins their breakfast with a fever of 101. At the end of the day, Sloan came home, smelled the eucalyptus on my sweater, and said, "Mom, you should really take care of yourself. You look terrible." The first crack, the first real one, the one I should have paid attention to, came in May. We were in their kitchen. Sloan was on her phone, Derek was opening a beer, and I was wiping yogurt off Cody's chin. I mentioned, casually, that my eye doctor had recommended I see a specialist in Philadelphia about some changes in my retina. I phrased it lightly. I said something like, "It's probably nothing, but he wants me to follow up." Sloan did not look up from her phone. Derek said, "Huh." That was it. The subject moved on. I drove home that night and thought, well, they're tired. They have a lot on their plates. I shouldn't have brought it up at the end of a long day. That was the first time I rehearsed an excuse for them in the privacy of my own car. It would not be the last. In June, I was reconciling my bank statement at the kitchen table when I noticed that my cell phone bill had stopped auto-drafting. I called the carrier. The representative on the line, a polite young man named Tyler, told me that my line had been removed from the family plan on April 3rd by the account holder, Derek Whitfield. My contribution of $189 per month had simply stopped being collected because I was no longer on the plan. I had a separate, individual line now that Derek had set up in my name, with a different number, on a different account, and I had been paying $94 a month for it without realizing, because the amount was different and I had not checked my statements carefully. I asked Tyler when the change had been made. April 3rd. The same week Derek had told me, in passing, "Hey, we might restructure the phone plan to save some money. I'll let you know." That was the entirety of the warning. I called Sloan that evening. I asked, gently, why Derek had taken me off the plan without telling me. Sloan sighed. "Mom, you barely use data. You text and you call. Derek figured a basic plan would actually be cheaper for you." I asked why no one had mentioned it. Sloan said, "Because it's not a big deal? Like, you didn't even notice for 2 months." I had noticed in 2 months. I had noticed the first time I sat down with the statement. The thing she was praising as my obliviousness was actually my discovery. But I did not correct her. I said, "Okay, honey, I just want to be in the loop." She said, "Mom, you are in the loop. You're literally always in the loop. That's the problem sometimes." Then she had to go, because the twins were screaming. I sat in my kitchen with the phone in my hand for a long time after that. I want to tell you I knew then what was happening. I did not. I told myself Derek was trying to save us all money. I told myself Sloan was overwhelmed. I told myself I was being sensitive. I made a cup of tea and went to bed, and went to. In July, at Lily's second birthday party, Sloan stood in the kitchen with 3 of her co-workers, women in their early 30s holding stemless wine glasses, and she gestured to me with her chin, and she said, "Oh, that's my mom. She's our childcare situation right now. It's been a lifesaver." And she laughed. The co-workers laughed politely. I was cutting the cake I had baked at 5 o'clock that morning, a strawberry cake with cream cheese frosting because Lily had pointed at strawberries in the grocery store the week before and said the word 3 times in a row. My hand kept moving the knife. I cut neat squares. I put them on paper plates. I smiled at the co-worker who came over to compliment the frosting. I did not look at my daughter. Cody came up to me later that night, when most of the guests had left, and tugged on my sleeve. He was just barely 3. He said, "Nana, why does Mommy only call you when she needs something?" I knelt down. My knees popped. I put my hand on his small back and I said, "Mommy loves us, sweetheart. She's just busy." He looked at me with those serious gray eyes Raymond had also had, and he said, "Okay." Then he ran off to find his sister. I drove home with the cake plate empty in the passenger seat. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands. I want you to understand something. I had spent 37 years reading children, reading their bodies, their faces, the little gestures that told me what they could not yet say. And my 3-year-old grandson had just read his own mother more accurately than I had been willing to. He had seen it. He had named it. And he had run off to play because he was 3. And because, what else could he do? In August, I asked Sloan if she could drive me to the eye specialist in Philadelphia. The appointment was a Tuesday in early September. I would need someone, I explained, because they were going to dilate my eyes and I would not be safe to drive home. I asked once. I did not push. Sloan sighed on the other end of the line, that long, exhausted sigh that had become her primary mode of communication with me, and she said, "Mom, we all have problems. Can you not make everything about your drama for once?" Then she said she had to put Cody in timeout, and she hung up. I sat in my chair in the living room. The clock on the mantel ticked. Outside, a sprinkler hissed in the neighbor's yard. I thought about Sloane at 4 years old running through that exact sound in our backyard, screaming, "Mommy, watch me, Mommy, watch me," and how I had watched her every single time, because watching her was the most important thing I had ever done. I made my own arrangements for the Philadelphia appointment. I asked my neighbor Eileen, who said yes immediately and then squeezed my hand and said, "Maren, are you okay?" I said I was fine. I was not fine. The specialist that September told me what my regular eye doctor had suspected. Early stage dry macular degeneration, slow progression, but progression. I would lose my central vision over the coming years. There were things we could do to slow it. There was nothing we could do to stop it. I drove home with Eileen and watched the trees blur past the passenger window and tried to imagine what the world would look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15. I tried to imagine reading. I tried to imagine seeing my grandchildren's faces. I tried to imagine which would erode first, my eyes or my daughter. I called Sloane that night. I told her about the diagnosis. I used the careful, simple language I had used with parents of my patients for 37 years. I said, "Honey, I got the results today. It's macular degeneration. Early stage. They're going to monitor me, and there are some supplements that might help." Then I stopped talking, because I had said the thing, and now it was her turn. There were 11 seconds of silence on that line. I counted them. I counted them because I am a person who counts things. Grocery receipts, repetitions in therapy, the number of times my husband took a breath in the last hour of his life. I counted to 11, and on the 12th second, my daughter said, "Okay, well anyway, can you still take the kids Thursday because Derek has a work thing?" I want you to sit in that silence with me. I want you to feel the 11 seconds. Because in those 11 seconds, I understood something I had been refusing to understand for 2 years. There was no room in my daughter's life for me to have a body. There was no room for me to be a person who could break. I was a function. I was a schedule. I was the soft architecture holding up the house she had built. And the moment I introduced a crack in myself, she had no language for it, because cracks were not in my job description. I said yes. I could take the kids Thursday. I hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed. I did not cry. I went to my dresser and I took out the spiral notebook I had been keeping in my purse, and I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, and I added up every grocery receipt I had logged since March. The number was $387 a month, on average, for 14 months. I did the multiplication twice because I did not trust my arithmetic. $5,418. I added the phone plan I had been contributing to and had not been credited for. $189 a month for 16 months before Derek pulled me. $3,024. I added the 14 months of childcare at the going rate Sloane had quoted me in February. $2,800 a month. $39,200. I added Raymond's hospice savings I had spent on the home setup, $18,000. I added the gas, the mileage, the lunches I had bought for the twins outside the house, the diapers I had grabbed when Sloane forgot to restock. I sat on the floor with my reading glasses pushed up on my nose, and I added every line. The total was just over $71,000 in 26 months. I want to tell you the number hit me like a slap. It did not. It hit me like a tide, slow and inevitable, and I sat with it on the bedroom floor for a long time. $71,000. Not in love, not in time, which was its own separate ledger I could not yet calculate. $71,000 in measurable, countable, dollars and cents money that I had given to a daughter who could not give me 11 seconds of concern about my eyes. That was September. The thing that came next, in October, was the group chat. It was an accident. Sloane had asked me to bring her phone charger up from the kitchen because she was nursing Lily back to sleep, and her phone was plugged in on the counter, screen lit, and a message banner slid down from the top. It was from a thread titled Managing Mom. The preview line was from Pauline, Derek's mother. It said, "Just let her feel needed. It keeps her busy. I want you to picture me standing in that kitchen, holding a phone charger in one hand, looking down at those 8 words. I want you to understand that I did not pick up the phone. I did not unlock it. I did not scroll through the thread. I simply stood there and read the preview and read it again and felt every cell in my body rearrange itself. I brought Sloane the charger. I did not say a word. I went home that night. I sat in my kitchen. I made a cup of tea I did not drink. And what I read in that group chat preview changed the way I understood my entire daughter's marriage. Because the word managing, that was the word. Managing implies a system. Managing implies a strategy. Managing implies they had been talking about me, not as a person, but as a resource to be allocated. The phone plan removal. The dismissal of my eye appointment. The childcare situation introduction. The casual cancellation of my insurance contribution, which I would not even discover until Thanksgiving, 2 months later. None of it had been carelessness. It had been coordinated. I did not sleep that night. I sat in Raymond's chair until the sky turned gray, and somewhere around 4 a.m, sitting in the dark with my dead husband's blanket over my knees, I made a decision. I did not name it yet. I did not write it down. But I made it. The decision was simply this. I was going to stop. Not dramatically. Not with a scene. I was going to stop, one thing at a time, until the house they had built on top of me collapsed under its own weight, and then I was going to see what was left. The doorbell rang the next afternoon. It was Pauline, Derek's mother. I had met her perhaps a dozen times in the years since the kids married, always at holidays, always in passing. She was a tall woman in her late 60s with silver hair cut short and a directness I had mistaken for coldness. She was holding a casserole dish wrapped in a tea towel. I opened the door. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Marin, I read what my son wrote in that group chat, and I want you to know. I told him he married a woman who treats her own mother like hired help, and he's becoming the same kind of man. May I come in?" I stood in my doorway with my hand on the knob and felt something break open in my chest that I had been holding shut for 14 months. I let her in. I made coffee. She sat at my kitchen table and she told me she had been added to that group chat 8 months ago, that she had been silent in it because she had not known how to confront her son, that the morning's message about the eye appointment had been the thing that finally moved her hand. She had driven over without telling Derek. She said, "6 months later, you will probably understand why I came alone today. But that Tuesday, I just wanted you to know you were not crazy and you were not alone." I poured her a second cup of coffee. We sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours. She told me she had watched her own mother be used up by her family in the 70s and had sworn she would never do the same, and that watching me being slowly emptied out by her son and my daughter was making her physically ill. She said, "I'm not asking you to do anything. I just wanted you to have one person in your corner who knows." I asked her if she was going to tell Derek she had come. She thought about it for a long moment. Then she said, "No, not yet. I think you need time to decide what you want to do. And if Derek knows I'm here, he will start managing you differently, and that will make it harder." Then she paused and she said, "If you ever need a ride to Philadelphia, I will drive you." I cried then. Not loudly, just 2 tears that I wiped away with the back of my wrist. Pauline reached across the table and put her hand on mine. She said, "Take your time, but don't take so much time that it costs you another year." She left. I washed the coffee cups, and I started planning. Now, before I tell you what I did, I want to say something to you, listener. If you are sitting with this story and recognizing something in your own life, if your shoulders are tight and your jaw is set, and you are thinking about the family member who answered your last hard conversation with a scheduling request, please drop a comment below telling me one word that describes how you feel right now. Just one word. I read everyone. And if this is the kind of story you need more of, subscribe. There is something happening in living rooms all over this country, and I want us to be in those rooms together. Now let me tell you what stopping looked like. The first week of November, I called Sloan on a Sunday night and told her I had a doctor's appointment Tuesday morning and would not be able to come at 6. I did not invent details. I did not over-explain. I just said, "I have an appointment. I won't be there Tuesday." Sloan said, "What kind of appointment? Can you move it?" I said, "No, honey, I can't move it." There was a pause. Then she said, "Okay, I guess Derek can work from home." That was it. Tuesday, I sat in my own kitchen and drank coffee and watched the light move across the wall above the bread box. The sun came in through the east window at a low autumn angle, sliding past the rim of my mug and laying itself flat across the grain of the oak table where Raymond and I had eaten breakfast for 31 years. I did not go anywhere. There was no appointment. I sat there for 6 hours, and I felt something strange. I felt my own time return to me, like a borrowed coat finally given back. I noticed the chip on the saucer that I had been meaning to replace since March. I noticed that the refrigerator hum had a small hitch in it, a pause every 14 or 15 seconds, that I had never had the stillness to hear before. I had rehearsed this silence for 6 months without knowing I was rehearsing it. Now it had arrived, and it was mine. The next week, I went on Monday and Wednesday, but called out Tuesday and Thursday. I gave different reasons: a friend visiting, an errand. The week after that, I told Sloan I was adjusting my grocery budget and would no longer be picking up snacks for the twins because my own expenses had increased. She said, "What do you mean, your own expenses?" I said, "Just adjusting." She did not push. Derek, I learned later from Pauline, called his mother and complained that Marin is suddenly nickel and diming her own grandchildren. Pauline said, "Maybe she's tired, Derek." Derek hung up on her. The third week, Sloan texted asking what time I was coming Sunday for dinner. I texted back, "I'm resting this week, honey, but I love you." She did not respond. 2 days later, a flower delivery arrived at my door. Roses in a glass vase. 2 dozen, the kind that come from a service rather than from a person who has stood in a shop and chosen. The card said, in a florist's handwriting, "Love you, Mom." I put the flowers on my kitchen table. The water in the vase already smelled faintly of the chemical preservative they pour in. Pauline came by that afternoon for coffee, saw them, and went very still. She set her purse down on the chair without looking at it. She said, "Did Sloan send those?" I said yes. Pauline said, "Marin, I need to tell you something. Last night I overheard Derek on the phone with her, and after they ordered the flowers, he texted her. I saw it because his phone was on the counter. He said, 'That should buy us 2 more weeks.' I looked at the roses. The petals were a hard, uniform red, the kind that has been bred to survive shipping and not to smell of anything. I picked up the vase. I walked outside and I set it on the curb next to my recycling bin. The water sloshed once over the rim and dampened the concrete. Pauline followed me to the door and watched and did not say anything. When I came back inside, she said, "Good." We drank our coffee. Neither of us said the word flowers again. By the end of November, I had stopped almost everything: the childcare, the groceries, the Sunday dinners, the emergency pickups, the medical appointment tracking for Cody's ear infections, which Sloan discovered, the hard way, by missing a follow-up and having to start the antibiotic course over. Each thing I stopped quietly, with a simple sentence and no apology. I did not announce a strike. I did not make a speech. I just was not available, the way they had not been available to me, and the absence began to do its work. Thanksgiving was the kitchen partition. I had agreed, against Pauline's gentle advice, to go to Sloan and Derek's for the holiday. I brought the cranberry sauce. I had started it at 4 in the morning out of habit. The way I had been starting things at 4 in the morning my entire adult life. The orange zest had gone into the pot first, then the sugar, then the berries, one bag at a time until the kitchen smelled like November's from 40 years ago. Pauline was there. Derek's cousin Andrew was there with his wife. The twins were running around in matching sweaters, Cody's striped, Lily's solid green with a small white collar. Football was on in the living room. The chandelier above the dining table, a fixture Sloan had picked out of a catalog the previous spring, was throwing little fish hooks of light across the wine glasses on the sideboard. I walked into the kitchen carrying the cranberry dish, and I stopped just behind the partition because I could hear Derek talking, and what he was saying froze me in place. He was telling Andrew about the insurance plan at his company, about the open enrollment window, and he said, casually, lightly, the way you mention a small administrative thing, "Yeah, I canceled Marin's contribution back in September. She doesn't really need all those appointments, and we needed the cushion." Andrew said something I could not hear. Derek laughed and said, "Yeah, exactly." I stood there with the cranberry dish in my hands. The glass was warm against my palms, the kind of warm that means a thing has been carried with care. I could feel the partition against my left shoulder. I could smell the orange zest. From the hallway, I could hear Lily say "Nana" to no one in particular, and then laugh at her own voice. I want to tell you my body did one thing or another. The truth is, my body did nothing. My body had been preparing for this moment for 14 months, and when it arrived, I simply registered it. The way you register a new piece of information that confirms what you already knew. There was no surprise in me. There was only the cold, clean click of a lock finally turning. I turned around. I walked back to the living room. I set the cranberry dish on the side table next to a coaster Lily had decorated at preschool. I went to the front closet. The coat's inside smelled of cedar and someone's perfume. I got my coat. I put it on without looking at the mirror by the door. I walked to the kitchen doorway and I said, "Sloan, I'm not feeling well. I'm going home." Sloan looked up from the salad she was tossing. A piece of arugula hung from the wooden spoon in her hand. She said, "Mom, you just got here." I said, "I know, honey. I'm going home." Derek had come around the partition by then. He stood there next to me with his beer in his hand. He was wearing the navy sweater I had given him for Christmas the year before. I looked at him, and I looked at the small water ring his glass had already left on the counter, and I said, "Derek, take care of those appointments you mentioned to Andrew. I won't need to worry about them anymore." Derek opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He closed it. He opened it again, and a single syllable started, a soft, choked thing that might have been my name, and then he closed it for good. Andrew, who had wandered to the kitchen doorway behind him, was looking at his shoes. Pauline was standing by the sink with her hand over her mouth, and I saw her nod at me once, very small, before I turned to go. I let the silence sit on the kitchen between us. I counted to 4 in my own head. No one in the room moved. Sloane's spoon was still in the salad bowl. The chandelier was still throwing its little fishhooks of light. Then I walked out. I drove home in silence. No radio. No tears. Just the road and my hands at 10 and 2, and the streetlights coming on early because it was late November. The wipers had a thin streak across the driver's side I had been meaning to replace, and I watched it appear and disappear with each pass. When I got home, the house was cold because I had set the thermostat low before leaving. I did not turn it up. I sat at my kitchen table in my coat, and I opened my laptop, and I sent one email to my insurance broker, asking her to switch me to an individual marketplace plan effective January 1st. The reply came within an hour. It was done. That was the night I closed the spiral notebook. I had used it for 14 months. The cover was bent at the upper right corner where it had ridden in my purse against my house keys. The first page was warped from a coffee spill that had dried in March. The last entry was from a Tuesday in October. $11.42, 2 boxes of crackers, and a half-gallon of milk. I closed it, and I held it in my hands for a long time. The cardboard backing was soft from use. Then I walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept the takeout menus and the rubber bands, and I put the notebook inside, and I closed the drawer. Some things should not be kept on the counter anymore. The collapse, when it came, was faster than I had imagined. The first week of December, Sloan called me at 6:42 in the morning. I was already up, sitting in Raymond's chair with my tea. I watched the phone vibrate on the side table. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 7, then at 7:30, then at noon, then at 3. By Friday, she had called 17 times. I listened to every voicemail, sitting in the same chair, with the same cup of tea, refilled. The first one was sharp. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear. The twins need a routine." The fourth one was confused. "Mom, did I do something? Just call me back." The ninth one was bargaining. "Mom, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings about the doctor thing. Please, we can talk." The 14th one was crying. A wet, gulping kind of crying I had not heard from her since she was 9 years old and had broken a porcelain figurine of her grandmother's. "Mom, please, I don't know what you want me to say." The 17th one was just her breathing for 43 seconds, and then a whispered, "Please," before the line cut off. I did not call back. Not one. I listened to each one sitting in Raymond's chair with my hands folded in my lap, and I let them play, and I let them end, and I deleted them, and I waited. After the 17th one, I sat for a long time and watched the snow start outside the window, small dry flakes that did not stick. I thought about how many times in 14 months I had answered her first ring. I thought about the sound of my own voice saying, "Hi, honey, what do you need?" I did not miss that voice. I did not miss the woman who used it. The daycare bill arrived the second week of December. $2,800 a month for the twins, plus a one-time enrollment fee of $450. Derek had been forced to enroll them the first week of November when I started missing days, because his company would not let him keep working from home indefinitely. He had not told Sloan the full amount. Pauline told me later that he had been hiding the statements in the bottom of his work bag and shredding them on Saturdays. Sloan found out in December when she opened the mail on a Thursday afternoon while the twins were napping. According to Pauline, she sat down on the kitchen floor in front of the open envelope and did not get up for an hour. Their grocery bill, Pauline told me, had nearly doubled. They were spending almost $600 a month on food because Sloan did not cook and Derek did not plan, and the two of them had been quietly relying on the meals I sent home with them in plastic containers every Sunday for 14 months. The lasagnas, the pot roasts, the chicken and rice in the blue Tupperware with the cracked lid. Without those containers in the freezer, they were ordering 3 nights of pizza a week, Thai delivery, a breakfast subscription service that Derek canceled after 1 month because the boxes piled up unopened by the door. The twins' routines collapsed. Cody started having tantrums at daycare, long, screaming ones that the staff documented on incident reports, 3 in the first 2 weeks. Lily stopped sleeping through the night. Pauline told me Sloan was running on 4 hours of sleep and had stopped washing her hair. Derek's performance reviews, Pauline said, had a note about decreased reliability under deadline pressure. His bonus that year was half what it had been the year before. By the end of January, they could not make the rent. The townhouse was $2,600 a month. The daycare was $2,800. The car payments, the car insurance, the utilities, the groceries, the credit card minimums Derek had been quietly running up since October to cover the gaps. They could not do it. They broke their lease in February. The penalty was $6,200. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a building 30 minutes further out, in a school district they had not researched, with a landlord who required first, last, and security up front, which they borrowed from Derek's brother. The apartment had carpet in the bedrooms that the previous tenant's dog had stained, and a kitchen with one window that faced a parking lot. The twins shared a room for the first time. Cody cried the first 3 nights about the new ceiling. Pauline called Derek the day they signed the lease. He asked her, casually, the way he asked for most things, as if it had only just occurred to him, if she might want to help out with the twins a couple days a week, just temporarily, while we get back on our feet. Pauline told him, in the calmest voice she had ever used with her son, "Derek, I saw how you and Sloan treated Marin for 2 years. I will not be your replacement. I love my grandchildren and I will see them on Saturdays for 2 hours at my house, and that is what I am offering. If you want more than that, you will need to pay for it like the rest of the world does." There were 8 seconds of silence on the line, Pauline told me later. She counted them too. We are women who count. Derek did not speak to his mother for 6 weeks after that conversation. Pauline came to my house the night it happened, and we ate Chinese food on my couch from the white paper cartons and watched a baking show and did not talk about either of our children for 3 hours. She fell asleep on the couch around 10. I put a throw blanket over her shoulders and turned off the television and sat in the kitchen with a glass of water and listened to her breathing in the other room. And I thought about how strange and good it was to have another person under my roof at night, after so many months of only my own breath in the dark. Sloan sent me 1 letter in March, a real letter, in an envelope, handwritten. 3 pages, front and back, on the cream-colored stationery I had given her for her 30th birthday and never seen her use. Her handwriting had not changed since high school. The same loose, sloping letters, the same way she crossed her T's with a small upward flick. She wrote about feeling abandoned. She wrote about feeling judged. She wrote about how hard her life had become and how she did not understand why I had pulled away so suddenly. She wrote near the end, "Mom, I know I haven't always been perfect, but you raised me to believe family forgives each other, and I am asking you to forgive me for whatever I did." I read the letter twice. The phrase, "whatever I did," sat on the page, like a stone. I sat down at my kitchen table and I wrote a reply. Not a long one. 3 sentences. I wrote, "Sloan, I love you. I am not punishing you, and I am not asking for an apology, and I am not coming back to the arrangement we had. When you are ready to know me as a person and not as a function, I will be here, and we can begin again." I signed it, Mom. I mailed it the next morning from the blue box on the corner of Linden Street, the same box she had mailed her college applications from 20 years before. She did not write back. Pauline told me, much later, that Sloan had read the letter, cried for an hour, and then thrown it away. She had not shown it to Derek. She had not torn it up. She had folded it and dropped it in the kitchen garbage on top of a coffee filter. Pauline knew because she had been there that afternoon picking up the twins for her Saturday visit and had seen the cream paper through the open lid of the bin. She did not fish it out. She did not say anything to Sloan. She came to my house and told me, and we sat with it. Sloan was not ready. I had hoped, for a few weeks after I mailed it, that she might be. She was not. And one of the hard things I had to learn in the months that followed was that hoping is allowed, and waiting is allowed. But waiting cannot be the entire architecture of my life. I had built one life around waiting for Raymond to get better. I would not build another around waiting for Sloan to grow up. I started doing things that spring. I had been donating quietly, here and there, to a transitional housing program for single mothers across town, a small charity run out of an old Victorian on Beach Street that had been converted into apartments. They had reached out months earlier asking if I would be interested in furnishing one of their units. I had said yes, anonymously, the week after Thanksgiving. By March, it was done. A 2-bedroom apartment for a young mother and her child, with a couch I had picked out in a soft gray fabric that would not show stains, beds I had assembled with Pauline one Saturday afternoon, with an Allen wrench and a great deal of laughter, a kitchen table where someone could write down whatever they needed to write down. I put a small spiral notebook in the drawer next to the silverware. I do not know if anyone has used it. I hope someone has. A local news team did a segment on the program in April. They mentioned an anonymous donor in her 60s who had furnished the unit. Pauline told me, weeks later, that Sloan had watched that segment from her apartment, had recognized the description, had sat on her couch with her hand over her mouth, and had not told Derek. She had asked Pauline, the following Saturday, in a small voice, "Do you think Mom is okay?" Pauline had said, "Yes, I think your mother is more okay than she has been in a long time." Sloan had not asked anything else. I did not do it for Sloan to see, but I am not going to pretend I am sorry that she did. Pauline drove me to Philadelphia for the eye specialist in April. We made a day of it. We left at 8 in the morning and stopped at a bakery off the turnpike for coffee and a cinnamon roll that came in a paper bag stained translucent with butter. We ate lunch at a small Italian place near the hospital, the kind with checkered tablecloths and a candle in a glass jar on every table. I had a tomato soup that tasted like someone's grandmother had made it that morning. The specialist confirmed the diagnosis and gave me a treatment plan and was kind. He had warm hands. He drew a diagram on a sheet of paper with a green pen and let me keep it. On the drive home, Pauline asked me how I was feeling. The sun was going down behind the hills west of the highway, throwing long orange light across the dashboard. I said, "Like a person." She nodded and did not say anything else because she understood that some sentences are complete. That summer, I started a small consulting practice from my home. 3 days a week, I worked with families of children with sensory processing disorders. Word of mouth, mostly. I put a small ad in the church newsletter and another in the bulletin at the community center, and then the phone began to ring on its own. I charged what my time was worth, $120 an hour, which was less than the going rate in the city, and more than I had ever charged anyone for anything. I did not feel guilty about it. I set up a corner of the dining room as a small therapy space with a padded mat I bought new and a bin of textured objects I had collected over the years, and I worked with children at the table where Raymond and I had eaten dinner. He would have liked that. He had always liked the sound of children in the house. The first family I worked with had a 4-year-old named Jonah, who could not tolerate the texture of his own clothing. His mother had cut the tags out of every shirt he owned and was hand-washing his socks in a special detergent, and he still spent most afternoons screaming. After 6 weeks of work, he wore a cotton t-shirt for an entire afternoon, and his mother called me crying. I sat on my back porch after that call and listened to the cicadas and thought about Marcus, the boy with the spoon, 30 years ago, and I thought about how some skills come back to you the moment you let them. My hands still knew what to do. They had been waiting. It is a Saturday in late September now. I am sitting in my garden. The light is going gold the way it does in early autumn. There is a small breeze moving the leaves of the maple by the fence, the one Raymond planted the year Sloan was born. My eyes blur a little at the edges of the sunset. The macular degeneration is doing its slow work. But the center is still clear enough to see the tomatoes I have not yet picked. 3 of them on the vine, still slightly green at the shoulders, and the chair across from mine where Pauline sat earlier this afternoon, and the grass where my daughter ran through sprinklers 30 years ago screaming, "Mommy, watch me." The cushion on Pauline's chair still has the dent from where she leaned forward to tell me a story about her own grandmother. The teacup she used is on the little table by the steps, with a half moon of lipstick on the rim. I miss that child. I want to tell you that honestly. I mourn her like a death. even though the woman she became is alive and well and living in an apartment 30 minutes away with 2 children of her own and a husband who is, last I heard from Pauline, in family counseling. They go on Wednesday evenings. Sloane has started doing the grocery shopping with a list. Derek has stopped drinking the after-work beer. These are small things. I notice them because Pauline tells me, and because I have not stopped loving my daughter, even from this distance. I cannot save the woman my daughter became by staying silent about my own worth. I learned that. It cost me almost everything to learn it. Peace and grief, it turns out, can share the same chair. If someone in your family has ever answered your medical diagnosis with a scheduling request, listen to me. You are not dramatic. You are surrounded by people who have confused your love for a service plan. Tell me in the comments, when did you realize your family saw you as furniture? I want to know. I am asking because I think there are more of us in this room than any of us realized. I used to think love meant making myself endlessly available. I was wrong. Love and access are different things, and I had spent 38 years confusing them. I used to think that if I just gave enough, I would eventually be valued. I was wrong about that too. People who are taking from you do not become grateful when you give more. They become more comfortable with the taking. The only thing that changes the arrangement is when you stop. Not with a speech, not with a scene. You just stop. One quiet sentence at a time, and you see what stays standing. That has been my story. One spiral notebook full of receipts that I no longer keep on the counter. One casserole brought by a woman I had been wrong about. One garden in late September where I am finally the only person I have to take care of. If something in this story found a place in you tonight, please share it with the person you have been protecting from the truth, even if that person is yourself. Subscribe and stay with me. There are more stories coming, and I want you in the chair across from mine when they arrive. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what you stopped doing this year, or what you wish you could stop. I'll be reading. Take care of yourself this week.